Hey, how you doing? This is adampostmediagroup. Okay, when you hire people that don't know what they're doing, they're going to do a bad job, particularly if you don't have other people who are there to clean up the mess of their work. Yes, it's a story about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's also a story of producing things that nobody actually wants. From Breitbart, far left HuffPost to slash 22% of newsroom staff. And it's not just the Huffington Post. From the Wrap, VOX Media lays off more employees just 1 month after last round of cuts. CNN is also getting prepared to dump a lot of staff. From the Daily Beast, CNN sees one of its lowest ratings ever as massive layoffs loom. And it's not like what CNN does is actually completely legitimate. From the Federalist, did you know they're still in a trial for defamation? Trial by ambush. CNN defamation trial gets heated during third day of hearings. This is when CNN went out of its way to push a narrative that someone who was rescuing people out of Afghanistan while the country was collapsing was doing it for personal profit. They knew it wasn't true, but they had a narrative to push. And the Washington Post. From the Wrap, Washington Post lays off roughly 100 employees. The Jeff Bezos-owned paper cuts about 4% of its workforce, with members of its advertising, marketing, and information technology teams affected. That looks like a cost-cutting move because, hey, things ain't going so well over there, but they're also not going so well over at the Huffington Post. One of the reasons why the Huffington Post is having a problem is because this is the editor-in-chief. She was formerly at The Root, which is known as kind of a racially focused media outlet, let's just put it nicely that way. Coming from Chief, this is before she destroyed what was left of that business and had to resign. HuffPost editor-in-chief on finding success and failure. Not knowing how to do something isn't a reason not to do it. Well, actually, yes. Let's get technical, and then let's get practical. Technically speaking, when you have a few options to consider of different things you may or may not want to do, if you get the opportunity to do something that you clearly have no experience in or ability to do, and say you just don't know how to do it properly, that doesn't mean you should just do it. It means you ought to consider, like, well, why should I do this? Why shouldn't I do this? Maybe this could damage the entire business and all these other people's careers and jobs. Certainly having no experience in a leadership position like editor-in-chief is a great reason, not just a reason, it's a great reason to not do it. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means, though, it's at least a good reason. And she should have gone with that reason. From the New York Post, Huffington Post to slash more than 20% of the newsroom, editor cites growing challenges to business. That was this lady. HuffPost is set to slash 30 editorial roles in the coming weeks, impacting roughly 22% of its newsroom, according to the company. In a memo obtained by the New York Post, HuffPost editor-in-chief Danielle Belton told staffers that due to growing challenges to our business, they should roughly expect 30 job cuts in the weeks ahead. Now, it doesn't sound like they even told people like if they're getting fired or not. Just like, hey, you know what? Just think about this. In the future, we're going to lay off like 30 of you, which is like 22% of the staff, so no one should feel safe when they get a notice like that, but they didn't get it done with and deal with the issue and then say, okay, let's move on from this. They just apparently told everyone, hey, we might be firing you, but we'll let you know in a couple weeks. Their newsroom employs 132 people. Quote, I write with painful news, Belton wrote. HuffPost is undergoing a substantial round of job eliminations due to ongoing and growing challenges to our business. She continued that she's been in contact with the HuffPost union about how to proceed, including the possibility of offering buyout packages to some desks in the newsroom. So no preparation, no planning, no figuring out who's got to go, who's got to stay, what are we doing here, how are people going to get compensated, are you going to give them time to find something else? None of that has been figured out. Why? Because you hired an editor-in-chief that did not know what her responsibilities were. And she didn't take that as a reason to not take the job, but she really should have. She continued, quote, I recognize that this is an upsetting way to start the year, and we'll be sure to share more details as swiftly and clearly as possible, as I believe it's important to be transparent and share information as we have it. It's just incredible. It's important to have a solution in mind for the company and also some respect for the people that have been working for the company, unless it's total bankruptcy mode and the whole place is on fire and there's no chance they're going to continue. Then it's just complete and total chaos. And that's a little bit unfortunate, but it is more understandable than this. And she said, in the coming days, we will make more information available about the job eliminations and HuffPost plans for 2025 and beyond, she added. A rep from the union did not immediately return requests for comment because they have no idea what's going on at the union. The union would love to speak out and criticize the company, but they don't even know what they're speaking out about because she hasn't been clear about what they were going to do with the company. HuffPost themselves declined to comment further on the layoffs. Print and digital media outlets continue to get hit hard by layoffs as the business deals with changes in readership habits and the sluggish advertising markets. On Tuesday, the Washington Post announced it was cutting roughly 100 jobs across its business divisions, as the paper faces advertising revenue declines and a pullback in subscriptions after owner Jeff Bezos killed an endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris a few weeks before the November 5th election. A lot of people who subscribe to the Washington Post were disappointed, like other major newspapers. They did not endorse Kamala Harris. But the Washington Post has been in trouble for a long time. But that's not all. This woman, realizing, hey, this isn't a fun place to work anymore, and I could go do something else, I don't have to stay here, resigned. 2 days later, 2 days after the announcements, they're going to do all the layoffs. From the New York Post, HuffPost editor-in-chief resigns after layoffs and fury at CEO for bowing to MAGA. HuffPost top editor resigned after the left-leaning news site was hit by mass layoffs, as fury grows that the parent company was bowing to MAGA ahead of Donald Trump taking office this month. Editor-in-chief Danielle Belton said she was leaving the company late Thursday, 2 days after the BuzzFeed-owned site announced it was slashing 30 jobs. And that's 22% of HuffPost newsroom. Quote, I could not in good faith ask others to make this difficult decision without doing the same, Belton wrote in a memo to staffers. She didn't like all the negativity, let's be honest. You know, I'm not inside there and I don't get inside information on the stories that I do. I just speak from experience, work experience, managing a business, managing people, dealing with tough situations, and having my own challenges from time to time. This is someone who wasn't up to the job, and as soon as things got difficult, she's running the other way. Quote, at my core, I'm a very sensitive and emotional person, which is why I haven't been as communicative in the last few days. Executive editors Kate Palmer and Whitney Snyder will take over in the newsroom, Belton added, while the company figures out its next steps with the editor-in-chief role. Because they completely don't know what they're doing. That's why it is really chaos. It's chaos over there. The layoffs followed a report this summer that former GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, who owns a minority stake in HuffPost parent, that would be BuzzFeed, has been pushing for cuts at the company. News of Belton's exit and the broader cuts related to business challenges sparked anger at BuzzFeed CEO Jonah Peretti. Quote, it's a tough business, and I'm not naive about cuts. But is he also another exec bowing to MAGA? HuffPost national editor George Zornick posted on X on Thursday. Quote, again, I know that layoffs happen. Believe me, I know. But the shocking scale of the week's announced layoffs do not match the financial information we have about HuffPost. We've been given scant, if any, explanation. If George Zornick really knew the numbers of what's going on over at HuffPost, he would not make a comment like that publicly. He hasn't even been fired yet. So why is he talking trash at a company where they're considering who they are and aren't going to lay off? I mean, that's pretty much the end of this guy's job. And if it isn't the end of his job, it really should have been. You're supposed to support the company kind of no matter what, or leave the company, go do something else. Alexander Kaufman, a senior reporter at HuffPost, shared Zornick's post on X and added, quote, in the coming weeks, HuffPost is going to axe upward of 1/4 of our newsroom. Under Zornick's leadership, my team won awards, broke major stories, and beat out monthly traffic goals by threefold. How does dismantling us serve long-term business or journalistic goals? If it's not making money, and it sounds like it's not making money, that's the bottom line. And here's another guy, Alexander Kaufman. Don't expect him to be staying there. You can't trash talk the company that you work for, even when they're putting you in this ridiculous situation of not even knowing if you have a job or not. You just can't. You want to look for another job, but you can't talk trash publicly about the company. Zornick also shared an excerpt from Peretti's recent interview with Semaphore following his meeting with Ramaswamy, who bought 9% of BuzzFeed last summer. He quoted the interview, which explores the role Ramaswamy, who was recently tapped by Trump to lead a newly proposed Department of Government Efficiency with Elon Musk, may play in the left-leaning site. Ramaswamy doesn't have control of BuzzFeed and expects to find a way toward a successful exit of his BuzzFeed investment, according to the interview. Semaphore also said, quote, "Perhaps there's a better path to successful activism and a bit of political satisfaction on the side. Ramaswamy is also pushing cost cuts." Are these people getting fired because of Ramaswamy and his cost cuts? Yeah, it's very possible. But it's also because they're not performing. You're not going to get cut or laid off or fired in 99% of situations unless it's direct discrimination, if you're actually making money for the company. If you're not going to make money for the company, if you're just there to push an agenda and have fun, you may not be able to keep your job. From the New York Times, Washington Post lays off 4% of its workforce. The Washington Post has started laying off roughly 4% of its workforce, according to the company, as the newspaper struggles to stem millions of dollars in annual losses. The cuts will affect fewer than 100 people across the Post's business divisions, which include its advertising sales, marketing, and print product teams. They will not affect the Post's newsroom, which 2 years ago reduced its workforce as part of a voluntary buyout program that eliminated 240 jobs. The cuts are part of a plan to adjust to changing business conditions, according to the company. Quote, "The Washington Post, no relation to AdamPost, is continuing its transformation to meet the needs of the industry, build a more sustainable future, and reach audiences where they are," according to their statement. Quote, "Changes across our business functions are all in service of our greater goal to best position the Post for the future." And I'm sure it is. The bulk of the eliminated positions are coming from the Post advertising division. Joanna Mayer-Jones, the Post's chief advertising officer, said in a memo to employees on Tuesday that 73 positions under her purview were being eliminated, and that the Post would prioritize connecting advertising clients to our subscriber base. Kathy Baird, the Post's chief communications officer, said in a memo that the public relations team was repositioning itself to focus on promoting talent and would stop the dedicated practice of publicity for our journalism. Those changes resulted in layoffs on her team. Quote, "Candidly, the moment facing both the industry and the Washington Post requires a reinvention of the established publicity function to develop more strategic practices for greater impact and success that are rooted in our talent," according to Ms. Baird. But the real problem is the Washington Post has struggled to turn a profit in recent years, as its digital subscription business has failed to offset declining print revenue and the costs of its newsroom. Will Lewis, the publisher of the Post, said in a meeting last year that in 2023, the Post lost $77 million and it suffered a fall-off in its digital audience since 2020. The Post has been in turmoil for much of Mr. Lewis's tenure, which began a year ago. Sally Busby stepped down as the paper's executive editor in June. Rob Winnett, the editor Mr. Lewis had initially selected to replace Ms. Busby, withdrew himself from that position. The newspaper also experienced a backlash among its subscribers over a decision to end its decades-long practice of endorsing presidential candidates. Antel Nays, the newspaper's Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist, stepped down last week after the opinion section rejected a cartoon depicting Jeff Bezos, her actual boss, the founder of Amazon and the owner of the Post, genuflecting towards a statue of President-elect Donald Trump. Several reporters have recently left the paper, including Ashley Parker and Michael Scherer, two well-known political reporters who joined The Atlantic, and Josh Dawsey, an investigative politics reporter who departed for the Wall Street Journal. If you do not know what you're doing, that's a great reason to not do that thing. It doesn't mean that you should not do that thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try something new. But it does mean that if you are considering reasons of why you should do something and not do something, not knowing what you're doing is a valid reason to not do that thing. And I think that Ms. Belton understands this now as the former editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.